But I agree that the big powers are wise enough, and I at least hope that they won't really engage in a pattern of activity that ultimately lead to mutual destruction. And I think we also agree that the U.S. has a lot to do, can do a lot to restrain so that it does not really have a slippery slope to get into it. But it's also important that we know, and the world know, that the Chinese leadership has thousands of years of wisdom behind it. And the key is also, we can hope that the U.S. is going to be smart enough not to do certain things to provoke it. But it's also important to we also know that even if you intentionally or unintentionally or, by mistake did anything, that we're not going to get into a Ukraine situation, because the worst is that they, U.S. may be just poking, some issues, troubles here and there. We're not going to fall into the trap. And I have great confidence in our leaders that China will handle the world affairs like a real adult. And I think I agree with Professor Sachs that we are not on that slippery slope, but it's important not to get close to that slippery slope, because sometimes things happen beyond your control once you are on the slippery slope.
Right. I'm going to double click on the word China wisdom, and I'm going to ask each one of you gentlemen to maybe sum it up in the most concise way possible, because there's been so much like official talks, diplomatic talks about Chinese wisdom, how a world where the narrative is incorporating Chinese wisdom, the Chinese model, Chinese way of thinking is going to be a more peaceful, more sustainable world order. That's been said in so many occasions, but I don't think if people hear it, they think about it as another diplomatic jargon. So really, does it make a difference? Like the cultural, the civilizational traits of China, and when you say China wisdom, what specifically is it? Because I don't think a lot of Westerners are hearing it. We're saying it, but they're not hearing it.
Well, in my mind, it's just one word in Chinese proverb, 以静制动. React to action with inaction. You do not act, you observe, there's no great English translation for 以静制动.
Funny thing is, the TikTok refugees that they flood to Red Note. Actually, one of the screenshot that I saw is it's in English. They're American. They said, "Oh, China, do nothing, win."
Yeah,
and that's close to it, no?
That's really do nothing until you see something, and not trying to preempt every other move the other side has made. Just stay, and the adult stays.
Well, the United States became the world's largest economy roughly in 1890s. It started war against Spain and conquered Cuba and the Philippines and other territories. When China became the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity in 2014, technically, China can, take back all these islands in South China Sea within 24 hours. But
militarily, you mean?
China did not do that militarily. We prefer to have negotiated solution. So this is a kind of wisdom. In a way, for instance, now we consider Philippines as a troublemaking country from Chinese point of view. But we use water cannons rather than shooting, guns, cannons, whatever. But we have also put the situation under control. As a result, we have this whole friendship, unity and prosperity with ASEAN, because Philippines behavior, whatever, is not that even welcome within ASEAN. And the Chinese way to handle it is also well received in ASEAN. So this is one way to see how we can do these things with this kind of tough and hot issues. If we use wisdom with Philippines, politics goes ups and downs, you have slightly longer vision. That's the key difference between China and the United States in terms of this world outlook, international relations. For the United States, it's a friend or foe, either with us or against us. For Chinese, you see, Chinese wisdom is friend or potential friend. You have a longer vision. You
one thing I do not agree with Professor Zhang is that Professor Zhang liked to go back saying that China is already number one from a purchasing power perspective. Right. I don't know why we wanted to do that. And it's a technical explanation of some economic rules that could potentially put China number one. I don't think China wanted to be number one. Why do we want to be number one? Because there's a responsibility coming, from being number one. And that itself is not terribly Chinese. Chinese, we want it to be number two, number three. It's okay. We don't need to be number one. We just mind our own business and do our things right and help ourselves help the world and be a responsible neighbor. And we don't need to be the cop and the big boy on the block and telling other people what to do. We just want to be left alone. Yeah.
No, the point is, especially in the field of geopolitics, if you underestimate your own power, your own strength, could also create serious problems.
You can overestimate yourself, but you don't tell everybody about it.
In fact, In fact, when this last governor of Hong Kong launched his so-called political reform in Hong Kong, he thought China's economic size is smaller than UK. Because by this, US dollar-based calculation, it was. So at that time, Russia made a huge lesson. It said, United States treated Russia as if its economy the size of Spain. So it pushed this expansion of NATO, even at risk of war. So Putin today only mentioned purchasing power parity. Russia is the largest economy in Europe, larger than Germany.
Because I believe, saying you're number one, both create external anxiety and creating unnecessary internal stress. Because if we all believe we are number one, we become cocky, we become arrogant. The Chinese are not that. And if you think your opponents or the rest of the world think you're number one, and then they are going to become more demanding and more challenging and more anxiety, greater anxiety, because I think that you're coming to potentially change the world. And I'm very happy, at least in my life, I'm very happy always to be number two, number three, never one. So I want Professor Sachs sitting in the middle, and we are surrounding you and paying deference to you.
But do you think that some level of confidence or cockiness is necessary for China now? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I hear things left, right, and center that I get confused as well. Is the Chinese economy still strong, going strong, or is the Chinese economy hitting some sort of or going off some sort of a peak with the real estate market is down, the stock market is down, the consumer confidence is down? I mean, which way is it? I don't know.
China has a very strong economy, and it's going to continue to be even stronger in the future. And the basic reason is that China is technologically dynamic, and it is already at the forefront of a large number of technologies that are the key technologies for the next 30 years. Electric vehicles, zero carbon energy systems, fourth generation nuclear, of course, battery supply chains, hydrogen economy, advanced shipping, 5.5G. These are the technologies that the world needs to make the energy transformation, to make the digital transformation. And China is very strong and very dynamic also in those technologies. And the manufacturing ecosystem, especially where we are in the Greater Bay Area, is absolutely extraordinary. I would say unique in the world. So, what's said in the media day to day, well, that's day to day news. But China, like any large economy, has ups and downs, and quarters that are bad or quarters that are good. And the COVID was a disruption and so forth. But you have to look at the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are very, very strong. And that's very good, because not only is it good for China, it's good for the world. I do want to come back to this question about China's statecraft, and just to say, of course, we can theorize, but I would point to two historical facts that I think are positive and important. First, China hasn't been in any war for more than 40 years. This is extraordinary. The U.S. has been at war basically every day for the last 40 years, and usually in a number of places. China had a 1-month war with Vietnam in 1979 and since then. And that kind of long peace is, I think, the best evidence we have about China's statecraft right now. There's another historical piece of evidence that I personally believe in, though it's argued and debated among historians and scholars, and that is there was a long, long period of several hundred years, basically 500 years, of what has been called the Confucian peace in the region of China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, lasting really from the beginning of the Ming Dynasty until the British invasion of China in 1839 and the First Opium War. And so this long period almost had no war at all. Now, China was undoubtedly then, whether it's PPP or market prices, though the concept didn't exist of GDP, it was by far the dominant power. But China didn't invade Japan. China never in its history invaded Japan, except when the Mongols were briefly running things from in 1274 and 1281. Other than that, for 700 years, it was never an invasion from China to Japan. China never invaded Korea in its history, as far as I know. China invaded Vietnam, yes, 6 centuries ago, in 1410 or so. So this is a long, long peace. And I think that is part of China's statecraft. It is part of a Confucian order, if one could call it that. I believe that that's true. Some of my colleagues in the U.S. say, oh, no, that's not true. China has to be like every other country, which in their mind is war all the time, because in America, it's war all the time. And why? Well, Europe has been basically at war for 1,000 years. And the fundamental difference is China unified and mainly stayed unified for 2,000 years, whereas Europe was fragmented. Then it colonized other parts of the world, and they fought. Even Donald Trump in his inaugural address, he expressed the kind of 1950s happy vision of America, that we fought our way across the continent. It was a very bloody bunch of conquests by colonial power. We're not supposed to say that in Trump's America, but the truth is it was an expansionist imperial period. And that's a different history from China's history. So bottom line for me is there really could be a big difference of statecraft. China, cautious, friends or potential friends, and this makes a lot of sense. We had one sensible president during my lifetime, which was President Kennedy, who tried peace, and he had a very wonderful line. He said, across the gulfs and barriers that now divide us, we must remember there are no permanent enemies. Hostility today is a fact, but it is not a ruling law. And so he talked about the fact that don't think about enemies and friends, but when you get to Biden, it's all, you're our friend, you're our enemy. And that's the mentality that's so dangerous.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。 美吧。